All right, thanks, guys. Got some MLB lines and leans for Friday's baseball action. But before we get into that, I just want to give a quick shout out, a big thank you to my headline sponsor for today's program. That's Jimmy and the boys at GhostPicksATS.com. And if you like making money on sports, there's no reason why you shouldn't check out one or more of their very affordable money-making packages. That's Jimmy and the boys at GhostPicksATS.com, GhostPicksATS.com. And without any further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at our Friday slate of baseball games and personal leans. All starts Eastern Standard Time. And leading off, we got Rangers. 7:05 Baltimore. The Rangers are $1.15. Totals 9.5. 70% are still leaning Texas. And at the moment, we got Hamels for the Rangers. Cobb for the O's. And speaking of the O's, a 10-cent fade of Baltimore in the early action here. They've also won just 3 of 16 matchups where Alex Cobb made the start. Now, total-wise, Baltimore's 36% to the under in their games at Camden Yards. They're also taking on a Texas squad who's 12-6 to the under in their games where Hamels made the start. So all those factors in mind, I'm going to lean toward the Rangers and the under 9.5. Next game, Brewers, Pirates, 7:05 Pittsburgh. Milwaukee's $1.10, totals 8 flat, 74% are still leaning toward Milwaukee. And at the moment, we got Junior Guerra for the Crew, Nick Kingham for the Buccos. Now, we did see a 5-cent fade of the Buccos in the early going here. We're also looking at a Pirate squad who's just 14-21, taking on teams giving up less than 4 runs per contest. Now, total-wise, we're looking at just 2-4 to the over in these Team 6 head-to-head matchups. We're also looking at a Milwaukee squad who's just 5-12 to the over in their games, where Junior Guerra made the start. So with all those factors in mind, I'm going to lean toward Milwaukee and the under 8 flat. Next game, Blue Jays, Red Sox, 7:10 Boston. The Sox are the $2 favorites. Totals at 9.5. Toronto's catching the 1.5. And at the moment, we are looking at Ryan Barucki for the Blue Jays, Rick Porcello for the Red Sox. But despite being the heavy favorites in this one, we did see a 30-cent fade of the Red Sox in the early going here. That said, though, Boston has been a dominant team against these Blue Jays this year, going 8-2 in their 10 head-to-head matchups. And equally as impressive to that stat, the Sox are winning nearly 80% of their ball games played at the current moneyline price. Now, total-wise, Boston's 13-6 to the over when Rick Porcello makes the start. Meanwhile, on the other side, Toronto's 9-3 to the over on the road when the line is 9 or higher. So with all those factors in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the Red Sox run line and the over 9.5. Next game, Yankees, Indians, 7:10 Cleveland. The Yankees are $1.20, totals 9 flat, 55% are leaning toward the Yankees. And at the moment, we got Domingo Germán for the Bombers, Shane Bieber for the Wahoos. And speaking of the Wahoos, we saw a 10-cent fade of the Indians at home in the early rounds of betting here. We're also looking at a Cleveland squad who's a winless 0-4 in their head-to-head matchups with New York. Now, scoring-wise, this one opened at 9.5 and moved down to 9 flat. We are looking at a 3-1 record to the over in these teams' 4 head-to-head matchups as well. Cleveland games are also 70% to the over at home. So with all those factors in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the Yankees outright and the over 9 flat. Next game, Phillies, Marlins, 7:10 Miami. The Phils are $1.25, totals 8 flat. Miami's catching the 1.5 at home. And at the moment, we got Jake Arrieta for the Fightins, Chen for the Fish. And speaking of the Fish, they actually took money in the early going here. Phil's open 145 down to 125, most likely a fade of Arrieta. That said, though, we are looking at a Miami squad who's just 27% after a day off. They're also taking on a Phillies team who's pounding losing ball clubs this year. 727 in their games versus sub-500 ball clubs. Now, total-wise, 10-7 to the over in these Jake Arrieta starts. Meanwhile, 2 out of both teams' last 3 ball games went over the posted total as well. So with all those elements in mind, I'm going to lean toward the Phillies outright and the over 8 flat. Next game, Nationals Mets. 7-10 Flushing Queens. The Mets are $1.20. Totals 8 flat. The Nationals get the 1.5. And at the moment, we got Tanner Roark for the Nats and Noah Syndergaard for the Mets. And speaking of the Mets, we actually saw a 15-cent fade of New York in the early going here. They opened $1.35 down to $1.20. That said, though, they are 7-4 in their games where Noah Syndergaard makes the start. They're also taking on a Washington squad who's a pitiful 28% in their games at the current moneyline price. Now, total-wise, this one opened 7.5 up to 8 flat. Mets games went just 3-8 to the over when Noah made the start. Meanwhile, on the other side, Washington games went just 7-11 to the over in their Tanner Roark starts themselves. So with all those factors in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the Mets outright and the under 8 flat. Next game, Diamondbacks Braves. 7:35 Atlanta. The Braves are $1.30. Totals 8.5. 67% are still leaning Atlanta. And at the moment, we got Zach Godley for the D-backs, Anibal Sanchez for the Braves. And speaking of the Braves, 20-cent move toward Atlanta in the early going here. They open $1.10 up to $1.30. They also won 7 of 10 games where Anibal Sanchez made the start. Now, total-wise, this one opened 9 flat down to 8.5. Atlanta's just 3-7 to the over in their games where Sanchez made the start. Arizona's also just 3-7 to the over on the road at the current posted total. So with all those trends in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take Atlanta outright and the under 8.5. Next game, Royals White Sox, 8-10 Windy City. Chicago's $1.25. Totals 9.5. 67% are leaning toward the White Sox. And at the moment, we are looking at Brad Keller for KC, James Shields for the Sox. And speaking of the Sox, they've actually been very good against this Kansas City team. 5-2 in their head-to-head matchups with KC. We're also looking at a Royals squad who's a pitiful 18% in their games at the current moneyline price. Now, total-wise, just 2-5 to the over in these teams' 7 head-to-head matchups. The White Sox are also just 7-12 to the over when Jimmy Shields makes the start. So with all those factors in mind, I'm going to go ahead and lean toward the White Sox outright and the under 9.5. Next game, Tigers Astros 8-10 Houston. The Astros are 260, totals 8.5. Detroit's catching the 1.5. And at the moment, we got Mike Fiers for the Tigers, Dallas Keuchel for the Astros. And speaking of the Astros, we actually saw a slight 20-cent fade of Houston in the early going here. Open 280 down to 260. That said, though, they are taking on a Detroit squad who's 11-6 in their games. More than one. Yeah, they're 11-6. Detroit, 11-6 in their games where Mike Fiers made the start. Now, total-wise, Detroit is 80% to the under versus teams giving up less than 4 runs per contest. Detroit's also 13-3 to the under on the road at the current posted total. So with all those factors in mind, I'm going to lean toward the Tigers catching the 1.5 on the run line and the under 8.5. Next game, Rays, Twins. Wrong direction. Rays, Twins. 8-10 Minnesota. Little flip of the lines in this one as Tampa opened plus $1, now minus $1.05. Totals 8.5. 56% are still leaning Tampa Bay. And at the moment, we got Nathan Eovaldi for the Rays, Jake Odorizzi for the Twins. And speaking of the Twins, just 1-3 in their head-to-head matchups with the Rays. They're also just 8-11 in their games where Odorizzi made the start. Now, scoring-wise, lots of unders between both of these squads. 6-2 to the under when Eovaldi starts, 12-7 to the under when Odorizzi starts as well. So with all those elements in mind, I'm going to lean toward the Rays and the under, 8.5. Next game, Reds, Cardinals, 8-15, St. Louis. The Cards are $1.50, totals 8.5. Cincy's catching the 1.5. And at the moment, we got Matt Harvey for the Reds, Carlos Martinez for the Cards. And speaking of the Cards, a 20-cent fade of St. Louis in the early going here. Open 170 down the 150. That said, though, the St. Louis team has been absolutely dominant against the Reds. 9-1 in their 10 head-to-head matchups. They're also taking on a Cincy team who's won just 9 of 28 ball games at the current market price. Now, total-wise, line open 9 flat down to 8.5. The Cardinals are also just 8-20 to the over, taking on losing ball clubs. So with all those trends in mind, I'm going to take the Cardinals outright and the under 8.5. Let me just mute that. Next game, Mariners, Rockies. 840 Colorado. The Rockies are $1.55. Totals 12 flat, 54% are leaning Colorado. And at the moment, we got Christian Bergman for the Mariners, Antonio Sensatella for the Rockies. And speaking of the Rockies, they took a lot of money in the early going here. Open 135 up to 155. They've also started to heat up towards this all-star break, winning 10 out of their last 13. Now, total-wise, really tough to tell where this one will end up since we just have 3 total combined starts between the 2 projected starters this evening. 12 does seem like a high number here, in my opinion. So with all that said and done, I'm going to go ahead and take the Rockies outright in the under, 12 flat. Next game, Angels, Dodgers. 10-10 Dodger Stadium. The Dodgers are $1.50. Totals 8 flat. Angels get the 1.5. And at the moment, we got Felix Pena for the Angels, Walker Buehler for the Dodgers. And speaking of the Dodgers, significant 30-cent fade of the boys in blue already. They open $1.80 all the way down to $1.50. That said, though, the Dodgers have gone 6-3 in their games where Buehler made the start. They're also taking on an Angels squad who's winning just 33% of their ball games played at the current market price. Now, total-wise, 0-3 to the over in these teams' 3 head-to-head matchups. Meanwhile, on the Angel side of things, 3 out of Pena's 4 starts also fell under the line as well. So with all those factors in mind, I'm going to lean toward the Dodgers outright and the under, 8 flat. Next game, Cubs, Padres, 10-10 San Diego. And no surprises here as the Cubs are the $1.35 favorites. Totals 8.5, 69% are still leaning Chicago. And at the moment, we got Chatwood for the Cubbies, Richard for the Pods. And speaking of the Pods, no real shocker here as they were faded a dime in the early going. Chicago opened $1.25 up to $1.35. We're also looking at a San Diego squad who's won just 13 of 39 as the official home dog. Now, total-wise, this one opened 8 flat up to 8.5. Chatwood starts also went 10-6 to the over so far in the year. So with all that said and done, I'm going to take the Chicago Cubs outright and the over, 8.5. Next and final game for the show, A's Giants, 10-15 San Francisco, and a 40-cent fade of San Fran in the early going here as the Giants open $1.80 all the way down to $1.40. Totals at 8 flat. The A's get the 1.5. And at the moment, we are looking at Jackson on the bump for Oakland. Madison Bumgarner slated for San Francisco. But despite the significant 40-cent fade of the Giants, they're winning 71% of their ball games at the current moneyline price. They're also taking on an Oakland team who's winning a pitiful 25% of their ball games played at the current market price themselves. Now, total-wise, Jackson's starts went 3-0 to the under so far in the season. Meanwhile, on the Giants side, 5 out of 7 Bumgarner starts fell under the line as well. So with all those trends in mind, I'm going to go ahead and take the Giants outright and the under 8 flat. All right, folks, that is going to do it for me. But before I get out of here, I just have to remind you to check out my daily best play at patreon.com/BrockPage. And with the documented win percentage of 60% for the entire year of 2017, you're hurting yourself each and every day. You're not subscribed. I also want to remind you to check out my headline sponsor, Jimmy and the boys at GhostPicksATS.com. Jimmy and his team of young, hungry, expert consultants at Ghost Picks are the most passionate in the business. And if you thought I was good at handicapping games, these guys are amongst the best in the industry. And as always, thank you for watching today's program. I hope you enjoyed all this great free information. And please don't forget to check out my daily best play at patreon.com/BrockPage.